The Carnifex. One of the most famous and well-known weapons of localized destruction in the arsenal of the Tyranid hive mind. Today we are going to talk about their role on the battlefield and the many interesting and weird variants of this Tyranid species. So, without further faffing about, let's learn about the Butcher. So, the Carnifex, which translates from Latin as the Butcher, is one of the most powerful but still relatively simple bioforms the hive mind produces. The equivalent to other militaries would be something akin to a small tank. The hive mind uses the Carnifex as basically a template that it then sticks weapons, biological enhancements and other gribbly equipment onto, depending on what role they have to fulfill. Due to their relative simplicity, they are able to be mass produced by the hive mind, and their biosuit blueprint has been shared around between pretty much every hive fleet ever encountered. On the battlefield, the Carnifex's main role is to take out the heavier equipment of the enemy that can't simply be drowned in bodies of gaunts. This includes tanks, bunkers, or simply running through heavy enemy fire followed by said gaunts. For each of these roles, the hive mind has a template in stock that can be instantly thrown into the oven and cooked up for deployment with frightening speed. Once deployed, the Carnifex has a single-minded purpose to take on everything that looks breakable, which to a Carnifex is pretty much everything that is not a Tyranid. It is usually guided towards its intended targets by synaptic creatures, like warriors or hive tyrants. Because, despite its size, the Carnifex is not a synaptic creature. In fact, the Carnifex ranks among the dumbest creatures the hive mind produces. Possibly even the dumbest.
The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma.
Once a proper breakable target has been spotted, the Carnifex will prepare for its charge, building up speed and momentum while sprinting at its target, smashing everything else out of its way. The sheer impact is often enough to topple over lighter vehicles like transports, completely demolish small walkers, and at the very least give everyone inside the heavier tanks a good concussion. In that case, the Carnifex brings its melee weapons to bear, which are usually the immense crushing claws, which are claws that can crush, which is why they are named like that, or scything talons, which are giant bony blades at the end of each limb that are strong enough to push through tank armor. Due to its low, to non-existent, intelligence, after a charge has been completed, the Carnifex may find itself out of synapse range. Then, it often reverts to a state of pure, uncontrollable rampaging, much like a toddler at a supermarket. It is literally so dumb that it has absolutely no self-preservation, natural instincts, or a single coherent thought in its head. Again, much like a toddler.
Let me see what you have! No!
It is of course not any less dangerous in this state, just more easily outsmarted because it will charge and swipe at whatever it sees. This rampage will continue until it's dealt with, or until a synaptic creature catches up to it and regains control over its tiny mind.
That's called common sense. That in your tiny mind is not common.
So in essence, this means that the hive mind's answer to tanks armed with lasers, missiles and guns that fire shells the size of small children is Tart Rage. And the worst part is that it works. There are also Carnifexes which can be seen dragging heavy bioweapons around. When in this role, they are given biomorphs to make them more suitable for this task. Also, because the Carnifex is as smart as a piece of toast on the freeway, it is usually the weapon who is in charge of the whole operation. In this role, the terror comes from the weapon itself, from the barbed strangler firing vine-like clumps that strangle their victims while injecting them with toxins, to venom cannons that fire such concentrated acid that armor works more as a trap instead of as a defense. And of course, Carnifex-sized devourers that fire worm-like creatures that burrow into your flesh and eat their way through your innards towards your brain. So, when the regular devourer fires a worm, the Carnifex-sized one, I imagine, fires something like a small snake? Either way, that thing's going inside of you. In both cases, while the offensive weaponry is already trouble enough, both the stabby and the shooty kind, the Carnifex's defenses are just as much trouble. Covered in thick carapace, overboned muscle and thickened bone, it is almost impossible to take down a Carnifex reliably with small arms fire, like las guns and even bolters. Most who face Carnifexes immediately divert their heavy weapons to deal with them, with las cannons and melter weapons being the most effective. Though plasma weapons, when big enough, also tend to do the trick. But even with such weapons, aiming for weak spots is required, and if all else fails, a shell fired from a super heavy tank's main gun right between the eyes also gets the job done. On top of all that, a Carnifex can be equipped with a wide range of biomorphs by the hive mind. These can range from adrenal glands to make it even more pumped up while it goes on rampages, to spore cysts on its outer carapace that it can launch at the enemy. We'll cover most of these with the relevant Carnifex variants later in this video. The Carnifex has been encountered with the very first hive fleets that the Imperium recorded, meaning that it's been in the hive mind's arsenal for Emperor only knows how long. While many variants have been encountered, and don't worry, we are going to cover all of them, there are 4 variants that have become designated subspecies of the Carnifex species because of how frequently they are encountered. And with a race like the Tyranids, which are all about evolving and adapting, it is really telling when it keeps using the same design over centuries.
So you know it's good.
First one of these main 4 is the Carnifex Forantii, more commonly known as the Fawnbag. Covered in big fawn-like spikes, hence the name, they are also equipped with some close-range firepower, like Death Spitters or Devourers. Among its back you will find spine banks, which it can fire at its enemies. For melee, it can be spotted either with stabby bits or pinchy bits. It also has a bladed tail, known as a treasure scythe, because why not? The next one is the Carnifex Bilius, nicknamed the Bile Beast. As the name suggests, it is a nasty beast, literally full of bile that it shoots, spews and ejaculates all over the place. Containing acids, pathogens and other toxins that it spreads with its puke and also spores. And whatever survives the vomit cloud created by this thing gets crushed by its massive claws, serving as fuel for this walking biohazard as it shovels the broken bits into its mouth. After that pleasant mental image, let's move on to the Carnifex Arbalest. Its nickname is the Stone Crusher, which refers to its role on the battlefield. Unlike the former 2 subspecies we talked about, this one has unique mutations that make it very special. Like, even more special than a Carnifex already is. Being equipped with wrecking claws, which are like crushing claws but much larger, or with a huge wrecking ball like appendage that it flops around all over the place. Both of these serve to crush fortifications, bunkers, walls, gates, you name it. If it is intact, the Stone Crusher wants it gone. The last one of the 4 main ones is the Carnifex Ululari, probably better known as the Screamer Killer. This subspecies also sports some unique mutations, mainly the ability to projectile vomit bioplasma that can melt even space marines where they stand. It earned this name because before the vomiting occurs, it lets out an ear-piercing shriek. Next to this very pleasant weapon, we have 4 scything talons, which unlike other Carnifexes, are arranged in a position that allows optimal hugging. Of course, there are even more subspecies in the Carnifex genus, so let's get on with those. The Razorfex, which is a pure close combat variant of the Carnifex, armed with a pair of scything talons and a pair of rending claws, making this the most dexterous of the Carnifexes. It is also pumped full with adrenal glands to make it faster and more twitchy, and with a scythed tail to make it even more razor-y. The Scuttle Basher. Fantastic name. What does it do? It scuttles and it bashes. I don't know what you expected here really. I told you before that Carnifexes love ramming into things. And this one is exceptionally good at that, but doesn't do anything else really. The Shovel Tusker. Armed with a pair of scything talons, a pair of crushing claws, and a whole bucket of tart strength. It goes on the battlefield flipping tables and tanks. The Strangle Cedar. Again, pretty simple, a Carnifex with not one, but two barbed stranglers. For double the fun and double the strangling. The Venom Spitter. Same deal as the previous one, but just with two venom cannons instead. The Terror Boar. A Carnifex with 4 devourers. The Oprah of worms. You get worms, and you get worms. Everyone gets worms. Apart from worms, it also shoots spikes from its spine banks, and it has enhanced senses, so you can't worm your way out of this one. The Tusked Shrieker. Another pure close combat variant. With 2 pairs of scything talons, bioplasma, and extra adrenal glands, this is basically just a bargain bin version of the Screamer Killer. The Death Beetle. This is just the hive mind being fed up, just throwing every biomorph it can fit onto a Carnifex, calling it a day and going home. It has a bit of everything and is a complete mess of biomorphs clumped together. As an added bonus, the hive mind gave it just enough intelligence so it can realize what an unlovable abomination it is, so it can cry about it non-stop.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
That last part isn't canon, but you can prove it's not the case either. And I saved the best one for last. The Toxic Lasher. This one is my absolute favorite because it is just a hive mind shoving a huge middle finger in the face of whoever is giving them trouble. The Toxic Lasher is the most unsubtle assassin in the Tyranid arsenal. It is sent down when the hive mind has identified key individuals that keep the defenses up and effective during a Tyranid invasion. With a single-minded purpose, it will be guided directly towards said individuals to take them out in the most gruesome and demoralizing way possible. The first extra it gets is a thicker carapace so it can actually reach its target. When it is there, it uses its 2 giant lash whips to catch a target and drag it towards himself. When it is close enough, it will upright itself and bombard the captured victim with its flesh hooks, which make escape no more than impossible while tearing the victim apart in a gruesome display. If that is not enough, the Toxic Lasher can spread a toxic miasma in close range, which, big surprise, is highly toxic. And to finish the job once and for all after it got the message across, it will impale the target through the head with its tongue. Think like a xenomorph's second mouth. The Toxic Lasher has no programmed return trip, so as soon as it did its intended job, it will just start rampaging till it expires. It is basically the Tyranid version of an Eversaw assassin. That's about it for more well-known Carnifex variant. Though there are of course innumerable combinations, these are the ones that were encountered often enough that they are worth documenting. Due to the Carnifex's nature of being a mass-produced dumbass, there are no named or unique Carnifexes, except one. Old One Eye. Old One Eye was part of the original invasion of Ultramar by Hive Fleet Behemoth. It was a Carnifex with before unseen regenerative powers, shrugging off direct hits that should have killed it multiple times over. On the world of Calf, It was finally brought down by shooting a plasma pistol through its eye directly into its brain. And if you paid attention, you know that must have been an excellent shot to hit something that small. For that, the corpse was left there and eventually froze over. A few decades later, some smugglers found it frozen ice like a Scooby-Doo caveman and decided to get it out to sell the corpse for a profit to either the biologist arm of the Mechanicus or to some rich collector, whoever paid more. However, as soon as the ice began to melt, Old One Eye woke up, broke free and did what Carnifexes do best: butchering. It started rampaging all over Calf, with a few leftover Gaunts following it around, though for some reason it is unable to heal the wound that original plasma shot dealt to his eye, which makes it pretty easy to identify. Eventually, Sergeant Talion of the Ultramarines was called over to take care of it, which he did. But the corpse was never found. Reports of a similar being with the same scar, being a dickhead, popped up all over Ultramar, and it has been reported as being killed over a dozen times already. In this day and age, Old One Eye is little more than a myth. Not because he doesn't exist, but because High Fleet Leviathan has copied his super regeneration over to newer generations of Carnifexes, making Old One Eye hardly anything special anymore. But he will always be the OG in our hearts. So that's it for today on the Carnifex, the living tank with the power of... Tell me in the comments below which subspecies is your favorite. And if you liked the video, please give it a like since it helps out a ton. And consider subscribing. If you don't, I might have to send a toxic lasher your way. Anyway, thanks for watching and see y'all next time. Cheers!